I walked into the venue with my son's tiny hand tucked in mine, his eyes wide with excitement because he had been counting down to this birthday for months. I had spent weeks planning every detail, choosing the best decorations, ordering the cake from his favorite bakery, and even reserving this upscale place that cost me nearly $4,000 because I wanted him to feel like the most special boy in the world that day. The polished floors gleamed under the lights. The smell of fresh flowers drifted from the centerpieces, and the staff bustled around with trays of food I had carefully selected from the catering menu. For a moment, I felt proud of myself, thinking how this memory would stay with him forever. But as we stepped further inside, I noticed guests slowing down, whispering to one another, and pointing at something across the room. My son tugged at my sleeve, confused, and when I looked up at the massive banner stretched above the stage, my heart stopped. It didn't say his name. In bold, glittering letters, it read, "Happy 7th Ava." I froze in place, my breath catching in my throat, because at first I thought maybe I was reading it wrong. Maybe the lighting was playing tricks on me, or maybe there was some mistake that would be explained in the next second. But no, the name was unmistakable, and it wasn't my son's. He looked up at me with those innocent eyes, searching my face for answers, and I had to force a smile so he wouldn't see the panic rising in my chest. I had confirmed this booking 3 times, even called the day before to make sure everything was prepared, because I know how venues can sometimes mix things up, but they had reassured me that everything was perfect. "Don't worry, ma'am. Your son's 7th birthday will be magical." Magical? Now all I saw was strangers' decorations, pink balloons shaped like tiaras, tablecloths in pastel colors, and gift bags labeled with another child's name. My stomach churned because all I could think about was the $3,900 I had already paid up front. Money I had scraped together because I wanted my son to feel celebrated for once, not overlooked, not second best. Memories of the past years flooded me. How every birthday before this had been a small backyard gathering with homemade cake and dollar store decorations. How he would tell me he didn't mind. But his smile never quite reached his eyes when his classmates bragged about trampoline parks and magicians at their parties. I promised myself this year would be different. I promised him. And now I was standing in the middle of what should have been his big day, surrounded by decorations for a girl named Ava, who I had never even heard of until her name was plastered across that banner like a slap in my face. The manager rushed over, clipboard in hand, smiling as though nothing was wrong, greeting me by the wrong name entirely. "Mrs. Peterson, everything looks beautiful, doesn't it? Ava will be thrilled." For a moment, I couldn't even find my voice, because anger was crawling up my spine like fire, and humiliation clung to me as parents nearby whispered, their eyes darting between me, my confused little boy, and the banner that screamed mistake louder than any words could. I finally managed to speak, my tone sharp but steady. "I'm not Mrs. Peterson, and this is not Ava's party. I paid for this venue. Where are my decorations?" The manager's face shifted instantly from polished confidence to pale confusion, papers shuffling in her hands as she stammered about double bookings and "will sort this out right away." But I could already see the truth in her eyes. Someone else's. Child was about to have the party I had paid for, and my son was seconds away from realizing that his dream day had been stolen right in front of him. The sound of children's laughter filled the air, but it wasn't my son's. It was a group of little girls in frilly dresses, already running around the venue as if it belonged to them. My son clutched my hand tighter, his brow furrowed, and whispered, "Mom, why does it say Ava?" His small voice nearly broke me. I bent down, smoothing his hair, telling him softly that there must have been a mistake, that I would fix it, but inside I was seething. I had worked extra shifts, skipped dinners, and cut corners for months just to afford this one day. And now the staff was looking at me like I was the problem, like I had crashed someone else's celebration. The manager mumbled something about checking the computer system, disappearing into the back, leaving me standing in the middle of the wrong party while guests eyed me curiously, their expressions ranging from pity to irritation. As though my presence was an inconvenience, I tried to picture how this could have happened. Was it incompetence? Or had they simply taken my money and handed the booking to someone with a bigger name, someone with connections? Because the decorations weren't thrown together. They were elaborate, custom, detailed. Someone had ordered them specifically, and the staff had gone all out. The venue I had reserved for my son's 7th birthday had been transformed into a princess wonderland, with golden thrones and shimmering banners. and the sight of it made bile rise in my throat. Meanwhile, my carefully planned blue and gold theme, the superhero centerpieces I had spent nights hand painting, the cake topper I had commissioned with his favorite character, where were they? Nowhere to be seen. I felt like the floor had given way beneath me. 10 minutes crawled by, and still no one returned to explain. Instead, a woman in a sparkling gown appeared, her arm looped through her husband's, both of them smiling proudly as if they owned the world. The parents of Ava. Their guests swarmed them, offering congratulations, while I stood off to the side with my son, who was now tugging at my sleeve, asking if we could go home. My jaw clenched, because how could I tell him no, we weren't leaving, not after everything I had sacrificed to give him this. But staying meant enduring the humiliation of watching another child's party take place in what should have been his space. When the manager finally returned, she had the audacity to ask me if I had my receipt. My receipt. As if the thousands I had paid and the signed contract weren't already proof enough. I pulled it up instantly on my phone, thrusting it toward her, my hands trembling with rage. She scanned it, her lips tightening, before muttering that there must have been an administrative error. I almost laughed, because what she called an error was my son's entire birthday being ruined. What she called an error was the theft of my hard-earned money. And as I looked at my boy's face, trying so hard to be brave even though I could see the disappointment sinking in, I knew I wasn't about to let this go quietly. I demanded to see the contract in their files. My voice low, but sharp enough to cut through the music that had started playing for Ava's guests. The staff hesitated, whispering among themselves, until finally one of them retrieved a thick binder from behind the desk. My name was right there in black ink. The date, the time, the full payment confirmed. I tapped the page with my finger so hard the paper nearly tore, and I said, "This is mine. You took my money. Where is my son's party?" The woman in the sparkling gown glanced over at me with a mixture of disdain and mild curiosity, then leaned toward her husband, whispering something that made him smirk. My blood boiled, because not only had this venue stolen what was ours, but these people, these strangers, were now treating me like I was the intruder. I turned to the manager and told her calmly, "You have two options. You refund me right now in full plus damages, or you shut this party down and restore mine." She blinked, clearly unprepared for me to assert myself, and began sputtering excuses about not being able to ruin a child's birthday. I snapped back, "You already did." The room went quiet for a beat, parents' eyes darting between us, waiting to see what I would do. My son, who had been clinging to me silently, pressed his face into my side, embarrassed and confused. And that was the moment something inside me hardened. This wasn't just about money. This was about respect. About the fact that I was tired of being stepped on, tired of working myself to exhaustion, only to be dismissed like I didn't matter. The husband of Ava's mother finally strode toward me, puffed up with self-importance, and said in a low, patronizing tone, "Maybe you should leave before you embarrass yourself further." Clearly, this is our event. I stared at him, unblinking, and pulled out my phone. With one click, I was recording, panning across the banner, the tables, the decorations, and then down to the contract with my name on it. "If you think you can erase me, you're mistaken," I told him evenly. His smug expression faltered when I added, "I'll be sending this to my lawyer, to the Better Business Bureau, and to every local news outlet that would love to hear about how families are scammed out of thousands by this place." The color drained from the manager's face. I could feel the room shifting, whispers turning into gasps, eyes flicking back and forth, and for the first time all day, I felt the power tilting back toward me. Because they might have stolen the decorations and the spotlight, but they weren't about to steal my voice, or my son's dignity. The manager begged me to lower my voice, glancing nervously at the crowd, but I didn't care anymore. I held the phone steady, my voice calm but firm as I listed every detail for the recording. The amount I had paid, the signed contract, the date, the fact that we had arrived to find another child's name hanging from the ceiling. People began pulling out their own phones, recording too, because they knew a scandal when they saw one. Ava's mother shifted uncomfortably, her smile faltering as she realized this wasn't going to stay hidden. The father, red in the face now, hissed at me to stop making a scene, but I looked him dead in the eyes and said, "You already made one the moment you let your child's party take place on my dime." The guests started murmuring louder, some clearly siding with me, others uncomfortable but unwilling to defend what was obviously wrong. I turned back to the manager and said, I'll give you 2 minutes to bring out every single one of my son's decorations and the cake I ordered, or I'll be calling the police to report theft and fraud." My son tugged on my sleeve again, whispering, "Mom, do we have to?" But I bent down and kissed his forehead, telling him softly, "You deserve better than this, and I'm not letting them get away with it." His eyes widened as though he was seeing me in a new light, realizing I wasn't just his mom today. I was his protector, his advocate, his shield against people who thought we could be walked over. Within minutes, staff scrambled out with boxes, sheepishly carrying my decorations that had been sitting in the back all along. The cake, still in its box with my son's name carefully piped on top, appeared on a rolling cart. They hadn't lost anything. They had simply chosen to prioritize someone else. The audacity of it made my hands shake with fury, but I forced myself to stay composed, because this wasn't just about anger, it was about making sure my son's birthday still meant something. The parents of Ava protested, insisting their party couldn't just be dismantled, but I cut them off with one sentence that silenced the room. "Maybe next time, pay for your own venue instead of stealing another child's happiness," the crowd gasped, and I could see the shame flash across Ava's parents' faces as phones kept recording. The manager, practically sweating now, turned to them and stammered about misunderstandings and contractual obligations. But it was too late. The truth was already documented, and no polished excuse could erase it. My son looked up at the decorations finally being set up for him, a small smile tugging at his lips. And that was the moment I knew. They thought they could humiliate me, but instead, they handed me the perfect stage to show everyone who I really was. The staff rushed to switch the tablecloths, swapping pastel pinks for the deep blue and gold I had chosen, and they strung up the superhero cutouts I had spent weeks hand-painting. Each piece that came out of the storage room was a reminder of how close they had come to erasing us, of how little they had cared about the sacrifice it took to pay that bill. Guests whispered while filming every moment, their eyes wide as they realized this wasn't some small mistake. It was a full-blown scandal unraveling in real time. Ava's parents looked furious, whispering sharply to each other, their daughter watching with confusion as the princess decorations disappeared one by one. And though part of me felt a pang of guilt for a child caught in the middle, the stronger part of me knew that guilt belonged to the adults who thought they could buy happiness with someone else's money. My son's face lit up as the banner with his own name finally replaced the glittering one that had said Ava. He grinned shyly, looking around the room as if to ask if this was really his moment now. I squeezed his shoulder and nodded, whispering, "Yes, sweetheart, this is all for you." For the first time that day, the weight in my chest loosened just a little. But the fight wasn't over. The manager kept pacing nervously, clearly trying to juggle two angry families at once, but I wouldn't let her retreat into half measures. I pulled her aside and said, "You're not getting away with a simple apology. I expect a full refund in writing by the end of the day, or this goes to court." Her mouth opened and closed like she was searching for the right words, but with half the room recording her every move, she finally nodded, muttering that she would process it immediately. The husband of Ava's mother exploded then, pointing a finger at me and snapping, "You ruined our day." I turned slowly to face him, my voice steady as steel, and said, "No. You ruined your own day the moment you thought your money or influence mattered more than a binding contract. My son's happiness isn't yours to take." That shut him up. The room was silent for a long beat, only the faint hum of cameras recording filling the air. And I realized something important. I didn't need to yell to be heard. My calm defiance was louder than any outburst could ever be. And with that realization, I felt a quiet surge of victory. Because this wasn't just about salvaging my son's birthday, it was about teaching him, and myself, that we never let anyone erase us. The party finally began to feel like it belonged to us, the music shifting, the decorations complete, the cake glowing with candles as my son's friends gathered around him. He laughed, really laughed, the kind of sound I'd been waiting to hear all day, and I stood there soaking it in, vowing silently that no one would ever take this joy from him again. But even as he blew out the candles, I kept one eye on the manager, making sure she followed through with the promises she had stammered earlier. She slipped me a signed refund agreement, her hands trembling as she handed it over, whispering that she hoped I wouldn't take things further. I tucked the paper into my purse without a word, but in my heart, I already knew this wasn't the end. They had humiliated me in front of my child, stolen my money, and nearly destroyed a memory I had fought so hard to give him. A refund was only the first step. I uploaded the recordings that night, every second of them, to local parent groups, tagging the venue so other families would know the truth. Within hours, comments poured in. People furious, people sharing similar stories, people promising never to book there again. By morning, the post had gone viral in the community, the venue's reputation unraveling before their eyes. Their phones must have been ringing off the hook, because I got another call that afternoon, this time from the owner himself, begging me to take the videos down, offering more money, even free bookings for future events. I told him flatly, "You think my son's dignity is for sale? You think I'll let this slide so you can do it to someone else? No, the videos stay." His sigh crackled through the line, and I knew I had finally hit where it hurt most. Their image, their pocketbook, their power. Ava's parents tried to save face too. But by then the damage was done. Neighbors and coworkers whispered about them, questioning why they had gone along with a stolen party instead of standing up for what was right. Their silence that day had been recorded too, their smug smirks caught forever on camera, and now the whole community saw them for what they were. My son, meanwhile, walked a little taller at school that week, telling his friends proudly about his party, about how his mom fought for him. And when one of his classmates teased him about the mix-up, he just shrugged and said, "Yeah, but my mom fixed it." That moment meant more to me than any refund ever could, because at the end of it all, the real victory wasn't the money back, or the venue's embarrassment, or even the public shaming of people who thought they could trample over us. It was showing my son that we never let anyone steal our voice, our joy, or our place in this world. Weeks later, the story was still circulating. Parents I'd never met before stopped me at the grocery store to thank me for speaking out, saying they had almost booked the same venue and were grateful they hadn't. Other mothers messaged me privately, sharing their own stories of being brushed aside by businesses, of being treated as if their money and time didn't matter, and they called me brave for not backing down. But I didn't feel brave, I felt justified. I had simply reached the point where enough was enough. And every time I replayed the image of my son's face, that split second when he first saw Happy 7th Ava instead of his own name, it reignited the fire in me. I couldn't let that stand. The venue eventually shut down, unable to recover from the backlash. Articles were written, exposing their shady practices, even mentioning the lawsuit I filed to recover damages beyond the refund. And yes, I pursued it, because why should they walk away unscathed after nearly stealing my child's joy? In court, I laid out everything. The contract, the payments, the video evidence, the witnesses who had been there. They had no defense. The judge ruled in my favor, ordering compensation not just for the original payment, but for emotional distress as well. When I walked out of that courtroom, my son holding my hand, I felt taller than I had in years. As for Ava's parents, their silence didn't save them. The community remembered. Invitations to social events dried up, whispers followed them everywhere, and eventually they moved their daughter to another school. I didn't wish harm on the child. She had been as innocent as my son. But her parents' arrogance had consequences they couldn't escape. It was a reminder to me, and to everyone who had seen what happened, that entitlement has a price. Now, every year when I plan my son's birthday, I remember that day. Not with bitterness, but with pride, because that was the year I learned that standing your ground, even when you feel small, can change everything. That was the year my son saw with his own eyes that his mother would never, ever let him be erased. And that was the year I stopped apologizing for demanding what we deserved. Time softened the edges of that memory, but it never dulled the lesson. My son grew older, and each year his birthdays became simpler by choice. Not because I couldn't give him more, but because we both understood that joy isn't in the price tag or the grandeur, it's in the honesty of the moment. Still, whenever we passed by the empty shell of that old venue, now boarded up with faded for-lease signs in the windows, he'd glance at me with a grin and say, "Remember when they tried to steal my party, Mom?" And I'd laugh, nodding, because what could have been his saddest birthday turned into the one he'll never forget. But privately, that day had changed me in deeper ways. For years, I had accepted crumbs, taken the apologies that came without action, swallowed my anger to keep the peace. That venue didn't just try to steal a party. They awakened a part of me that had been silent for too long, the part that says no more, that refuses to be sidelined or dismissed. And once you discover that voice, you don't go back. I started speaking up more often, at work, in my personal life, even in the small daily interactions where people thought they could take advantage. Each time I held my ground, I felt that same quiet strength I'd found when I stood in that room, surrounded by strangers, refusing to let my son's day be erased. Sometimes I still receive messages from parents who watch the videos, thanking me for reminding them that we don't have to accept being walked over. They tell me they used my story to push back when venues or companies tried to shortchange them. And that always makes me smile, because it means what happened to us wasn't just a humiliation, it became a warning, a spark that lit something bigger than me. And yet, the truest revenge wasn't the viral outrage or the court's decision. It was the way my son looked at me after it all, pride shining in his eyes as he told his friends, "My mom doesn't let anyone mess with us." That pride was worth more than every dollar I fought to get back. It was proof that the strongest victories are the ones your children carry with them, shaping how they see themselves and how they learn to fight for their place in the world. Years passed, but the memory never fully faded, and sometimes when I least expected it, it came rushing back, like the time my son's teacher asked each child to share their bravest memory, and he raised his hand proudly to say, "When my mom stood up for me at my birthday party." The class laughed at first, but then he told the whole story, and the teacher's eyes widened. Later that afternoon, she pulled me aside, saying she had never seen a child speak about his mother with that much respect. My throat tightened, because in that moment I realized something powerful. He hadn't just remembered the decorations or the cake. He had remembered me fighting for him, refusing to let him feel invisible. That was his anchor, and I had given it to him without even realizing how much it would mean in the years to come. The venue itself became a cautionary tale in our town. Every parent knew the story, and when new businesses opened, they made sure their contracts were airtight, their customer service sharp, because no one wanted to be the next scandal. People still stopped me in the supermarket to ask, "Are you the one from the birthday video?" And though at first it embarrassed me, I came to wear it as a badge of honor. Yes, I was that mom. The mom who didn't back down. The mom who forced accountability where there had been none. The mom who showed her son, and everyone watching, that silence helps only the ones who exploit you. Ava's family never recovered their reputation. Whispers followed them long after they tried to start over in another town. I sometimes wondered if they regretted the smirks, the arrogance, the way they thought they could push me out of the room. Because I wasn't the same woman I had been when I walked in that day. I walked out different, sharper, stronger, unwilling to let anyone mistake my kindness for weakness ever again. And my son? He grew into a young man who stood his ground, who refused to let bullies or liars intimidate him, who carried himself with a confidence I knew had been born in that moment, when a banner with someone else's name nearly stole his birthday, but his mother refused to let it end that way. That banner had been my breaking point, but it became his foundation. And that, more than any refund or court ruling, was the justice we truly won. By the time my son reached his teenage years, the story had become almost legendary in our family. Retold at gatherings with a mix of humor and pride, but beneath the laughter, there was always a deeper truth that lingered. That day had marked the end of one version of me, the quiet, accommodating woman who let others smooth over her pain with excuses, and the beginning of another, the woman who refused to be erased. I saw the ripple effects everywhere. My son started to step up for himself in ways that reminded me of that party. When a teacher unfairly marked him down on a project, he presented evidence calmly and earned his grade back. When his friends pressured him into going along with something he didn't want, he said no firmly without apology. And every time he did, I felt a quiet swell of pride, knowing he was carrying forward the lesson he had witnessed that day. That dignity isn't handed to you, you claim it and defend it, even when the room is stacked against you. For me, that lesson reshaped everything. At work, I stopped saying yes to every request that drained me. And for the first time in years, I asked for the raise I knew I had earned. When people tried to dismiss me, I didn't shrink. I stood taller, reminding them that my presence wasn't negotiable. In friendships, I stopped pouring myself out for people who gave little in return. And in family, I drew boundaries that once would have seemed impossible, refusing to carry everyone's burdens while mine were ignored. That birthday fiasco hadn't just been about a venue or decorations, it had been a mirror, showing me how often I had let myself be treated as if my voice didn't matter. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Sometimes late at night I thought back to that banner. Happy 7th Ava. The way the glittering letters had mocked me in front of a crowd. At the time, it had felt like a gut punch, a humiliation too sharp to recover from. But looking back now, I realized it had been the spark that lit a fire in me I'd been needing all along. And though Ava's name had hung above us that day, it was my son's name that ended up shining brighter, not because of balloons or cake, but because he saw a mother who refused to let anyone take what was his. That memory became his inheritance, more valuable than any gift wrapped in paper and bows. And in the end, that was the irony. They thought they were taking our joy, but they handed us something stronger, something lasting. They gave me the resolve to never again let money, status, or arrogance silence me. And they gave my son the living proof that even in the face of humiliation, you can reclaim your voice, your dignity, and your rightful place. It was the longest, hardest birthday of my life, but also the most important. Because it didn't just change him, it changed me. And that change carried us forward into everything that came after. Years later, when I look back, I don't see the decorations or the cake first. I see the look in my son's eyes when he realized I wasn't going to back down, when he understood that no matter how hard people tried to push us aside, I would fight for him until the end. That moment became the core of who we are as a family. Unshakable, unafraid, unwilling to be erased. The venue is long gone now, the people who tried to humiliate us forgotten by most. But what remains is the strength we discovered in ourselves. My son grew into a man who doesn't compromise his worth, and I became a woman who no longer accepts crumbs when she deserves the whole table. That birthday could have broken us, but instead it built us. And in the end, that is the sweetest revenge of all, to rise stronger, prouder, and louder than anyone ever expected. Tell me, what would you have done if you walked into a party you paid for, only to see someone else's name hanging above the room? Would you have stayed silent or stood your ground like I did?